They say that in the world of organized crime, a bullet is the loudest thing in the room. They are wrong. In the circles of the High Commission, the loudest thing is a secret kept too long. Lorenzo Moretti was the most feared capo in New York, a man surrounded by an army of soldiers, yet completely isolated by a wall of silence. He thought he was surrounded by loyalists, but he was drowning in snakes. He thought no one could understand the burden of his heritage, let alone the dialect of his nightmares. He was wrong. The only person actually listening wasn't his underboss or his consigliere. It was the invisible girl refilling his water glass. And the moment she opened her mouth, the war began. The clinking of silverware against fine china at Leone's supper club was a code of its own. If the clinking was steady, business was good. If the room went silent, someone was about to die. Camilla Vance knew the rhythm. She had worked the floor of the exclusive Manhattan steakhouse for 6 months, keeping her head down. Her dark hair pulled into a severe, nondescript bun, and her lips sealed. She was 24, broke, and possessed a resume that was half truth, half fiction. To the manager, Paulie, she was just a girl from Jersey who needed rent money. She was also the daughter of a ghost, but that was a life she had buried 3 years ago, along with a casket in a closed ceremony in Palermo. Table 4 needs a decanter of the '98 Tignanello. Now, Vance, Paulie hissed, snapping his fingers near her ear. And don't look them in the eye. You know the drill. It's the Moretti party. Camilla's stomach tightened, but her face remained a mask of indifference. Yes, sir. The air in the private back room was thick enough to choke on. It smelled of cigar smoke, expensive cologne, acqua di Parma, and fear. In the center of the plush leather booth sat Lorenzo Moretti. Lorenzo was not what the tabloids painted him to be. They called him the Butcher of Brooklyn, a brute in a suit. Up close, however, the violence was quieter. It was in the way he held his wine glass loosely, as if he could crush the crystal stem without a thought. He was young for a Don, barely 32, with sharp features cut from marble, and eyes that looked like they had seen the end of the world and found it boring. He was flanked by 3 men. To his left was Marco, his translator and supposed right-hand man for international dealings. To his right, 2 heavily armed bodyguards, distinct bulges visible beneath their Armani jackets. Across from them sat a group of Russians, led by a man named Volkov. Camilla approached the table with the silence of a shadow. She uncorked the Tignanello, her movements fluid. The negotiation was going poorly. Volkov slammed a heavy hand on the table, rattling the cutlery. He spoke in rapid, aggressive Russian. Lorenzo remained still, his eyes fixed on Volkov. He turned to Marco. What did he say? Marco cleared his throat, adjusting his tie nervously. He says the shipment is delayed because of customs at the port. He asks for patience, boss. Camilla paused mid-pour just for a fraction of a second. She didn't speak Russian, but she knew the tone of a lie. Marco was sweating. His pulse was visible in his neck. Lorenzo sighed, leaning back. He looked tired. He muttered something under his breath, barely a whisper in a dialect of Italian so old and specific to the hills of Corleone that it was practically a dead language in New York. Sono circondato da idioti che pensano che io sia sordo. I am surrounded by idiots who think I am deaf. He continued, his voice low, effectively, talking to himself, assuming the language barrier was his shield. Questo russo sta mentendo, e Marco sta sudando come un maiale al macello. Se non scopro cosa sta succedendo stasera, dovrò ucciderli tutti. This Russian is lying and Marco is sweating like a pig at the slaughterhouse. If I don't find out what is happening tonight, I will have to kill them all. Camilla finished pouring the wine. She should have walked away. That was the rule. The invisible waitress survives by being furniture. But looking at Lorenzo, a man isolated at the top of a food chain being fed, lies by the very man supposed to be his voice. Something in her blood rebelled. It was the same blood that had gotten her father killed. She placed the bottle down on the coaster. She didn't look at the Russians. She didn't look at Marco. She looked directly at the tablecloth, but she spoke clearly, her voice low and steady. Il russo non ha detto che è la dogana. Ha detto che hanno venduto il carico ai triadi. The room didn't just go silent. The air was sucked out of it. Lorenzo froze. His hand, which had been reaching for his glass, stopped in mid-air. Camilla had spoken in perfect native Italian, but not just standard Italian. She had replied using the same inflection, the same cadence he had just used. Lorenzo slowly turned his head. For the first time all night, he actually looked at her. He saw the fraying collar of her uniform, the tired shadows under her hazel eyes, and the terrifying calmness of her posture. "What did you say?" Lorenzo asked in English this time. His voice was a low rumble, dangerous and confused. Marco stood up, his face pale. "Boss, she's just a stupid waitress. She doesn't know what—" Lorenzo held up one finger. Marco snapped his mouth shut and sat down, trembling. Lorenzo looked at Camilla. "Repeat it. In English." Camilla finally lifted her gaze. Her heart was hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird, but she channeled the ice her father had taught her. "The Russian didn't mention customs, sir. I picked up enough words working in Brighton Beach to know. And your translator. He left out the part where Volkov insulted your mother." Lorenzo's eyes darted to Marco. Marco looked like he was about to vomit. "Is that so?" Lorenzo asked, his voice deceptively light. "He said they sold the shipment to the triads." Camilla continued, her voice gaining strength. "And he told your man here that you are a paper tiger who pays for empty containers." Lorenzo stared at her for a long, agonizing 10 seconds. He was dissecting her. He was looking for the wire, the badge, the trap. But all he saw was a waitress holding a wine napkin. Then a corner of Lorenzo's mouth twitched. Not a smile. A predator acknowledging prey that bit back. He turned to Volkov. The Russian looked confused, not understanding the English exchange. Lorenzo switched to perfect fluent Russian. Volkov's eyes widened in horror. "You speak Russian?" Marco whispered, the color draining from his face. "I learned last month," Lorenzo said calmly, standing up and buttoning his jacket. "I just wanted to see who would tell me the truth first. I didn't expect it to be the girl pouring the wine." Lorenzo pulled a silver pistol from his jacket, a customized Beretta 92 FS. He didn't aim it at the Russians. He aimed it at Marco. Bang! The shot was deafening in the small room. Marco slumped forward onto the linguine. Camilla didn't scream. She didn't flinch. She simply took a step back, clutching the serving tray to her chest to shield her uniform from the blood splatter. Lorenzo noticed the lack of flinch. His eyes narrowed. "Get out," Lorenzo said to the Russians. "Leave New York tonight or you end up like Marco." Volkov and his men scrambled over each other to exit the booth, fleeing the restaurant. Now it was just Lorenzo, his 2 guards, and Camilla. The dead body was cooling on the table. Lorenzo holstered his weapon and walked around the table until he was standing inches from Camilla. He smelled of gunpowder and expensive wine. He towered over her, his presence overwhelming. "Who are you?" he demanded softly. "Camilla," she whispered. "Camilla who? Just Camilla." "You understood what I said to myself before," he said, stepping closer. "That wasn't Italian you learn in school, Camilla. That was Sicilian. Old Sicilian. Who taught you that? My grandmother, she lied. It was a practiced lie." Lorenzo reached out his leather-gloved hand, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. His touch was electric, terrifying. "You didn't flinch when I pulled the trigger. Most civilians scream." "I've seen worse in this restaurant on a Saturday night," she said, trying to deflect. Lorenzo studied her face, searching for the crack in her armor. "You saved me millions of dollars tonight, Camilla. And you exposed a rat." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a money clip thick with $100 bills. He shoved it into the pocket of her apron. "Go home. Don't come back to work tomorrow." Camilla felt a chill. "Are you firing me?" "No," Lorenzo said, turning his back to her. "I'm acquiring you. Be ready at 8:00 a.m. A car will pick you up." "I don't work for you," she stammered, panic finally setting in. Lorenzo glanced over his shoulder, his eyes dark and empty. "You heard things tonight that grant you two options. You work for me, or you end up on the floor next to Marco. I suggest you choose the job." The car was a black Mercedes Maybach, and it was parked outside her crumbling apartment building in Queens at 7:55 a.m. sharp. Camilla had spent the night staring at the door, a kitchen knife in her hand, wondering if she should run. But run where Lorenzo Moretti had reach. If he was the saint of the underworld, his miracles were finding people who didn't want to be found. She got in the car. The driver was a mountain of a man with a scar running through his eyebrow. "Name's Dante," he grunted. "Boss is waiting at the estate." The drive to Long Island took an hour. They passed through iron gates marked with a crest, a lion holding a sword. The Moretti estate was less of a house and more of a fortress, disguised as a mansion. High walls, cameras everywhere, and men patrolling the grounds with dogs. Camilla was led into a massive library. The walls were lined with books that looked centuries old. In the center of the room, behind a mahogany desk, sat Lorenzo. He was wearing a casual black sweater and dark jeans, looking less like a mob boss and more like a brooding tech CEO were it not for the heavy stillness that surrounded him. "You're punctual," he said without looking up from a stack of documents. "I like that." "I didn't have much choice," Camilla replied, standing near the door. "Sit." She sat. The leather chair was uncomfortable, stiff. Lorenzo finally looked up. "I ran a background check on you last night. Camilla Vance. Born in Jersey. Mother died when you were 10. Father listed as unknown. High school dropout. Waitress jobs for the last 5 years." He slid a file across the desk. "It's a very clean history. Boring, actually." "I live a boring life," she said. "Bullshit," Lorenzo said softly. "You speak a dialect of Sicilian that belongs to the families of Palermo. You identify a lie in a language you shouldn't know, and you have the stillness of a soldier." He leaned forward, his eyes locking onto hers. "Who is your father?" Camilla's heart stopped. She had to be careful. If he knew she was the daughter of Matteo Rinaldi, the exiled consigliere of the rival Vitale family, she would be dead before she could exhale. The Vitales and the Morettis had been at war for decades. Her father had fled to America to escape the life changing their names, but the life had found him anyway. He was a nobody, Camilla said, her voice steady. He worked construction. He drank. He died. Lorenzo studied her for a long time. It felt like he was reading the code in her DNA. Finally, he sat back. Fine. Keep your secrets. For now. He stood up and walked to the window looking out at the sprawling gardens. Marco was my voice. He handled the Calabrians, the Russians, the Chinese. I speak 3 languages, but I cannot speak them all. And more importantly, I cannot trust anyone in my inner circle right now. Marco was with me for 10 years, and he sold me out for a crate of heroin. He turned back to her. You are going to be my new personal assistant, but your real job is to be my ears. I'm not a criminal, Camilla said. You are now, Lorenzo replied simply. You will accompany me to meetings. You will pour the wine. You will look at the floor. And afterwards, you will tell me everything they said, everything they whispered, and everything they didn't say. You are my lie detector, and if I refuse, then you are a liability, a loose end who knows I killed a man at Leone's. His face was expressionless. I don't leave loose ends, Camilla. It wasn't a threat. It was a statement of fact. What is the pay? She asked. Lorenzo blinked, surprised by her pragmatism. A smirk touched his lips. 10,000 a week. Cash, plus room and board here. I'm not living here, she shot back. You are. It's for your own protection. The Russians saw your face. If Volkov is stupid enough to come back, he might think you're important. I keep what is mine behind these walls. What is mine? The possessiveness in his voice sent a shiver down her spine that wasn't entirely fear. Fine, she said. But I have conditions. Lorenzo raised an eyebrow. You are in no position to negotiate. I need access to a secure phone, and I want no part in the violence. I interpret words, Lorenzo. I don't clean up blood. Lorenzo walked around the desk until he was standing right in front of her. He was close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. In this house, Camilla, words are violence. But very well. Deal. He extended his hand. She took it. His grip was warm, rough, and firm. Welcome to the family, he said. At that moment, the library doors burst open. A man stormed in Alessandro Lorenzo's younger, volatile brother. He looked like a wilder, less refined version of Lorenzo. Enzo, Alessandro shouted, ignoring Camilla. We have a problem. The shipment Marco sold. It wasn't just drugs. It was the blueprints. Lorenzo's face hardened into stone. He didn't let go of Camilla's hand. The architectural blueprints. For the Federal Reserve Vault renovation. The ones we spent 2 years acquiring. Lorenzo cursed in Italian. He finally released Camilla's hand and turned to his brother. If the triads have those prints, they will hit the vault before we can. We need to meet with the commission. Tonight. Alessandro finally looked at Camilla, sneering. Who is the skirt? Staff, Lorenzo said, his voice cold. He looked at Camilla. Get ready, Camilla. Tonight you earn your keep. We are going to a sit-down with the 5 families. Camilla felt the blood drain from her face. The 5 families. That meant the Vitalis would be there. Her father's old family. The people who had put a price on his head and hers. I can't go to a commission meeting, she whispered. I'm just a waitress. Lorenzo stepped close to her, his voice dropping to a whisper, intimate and terrifying. You are not a waitress anymore. You are the only person in this room I haven't caught lying to me yet. Put on a dress. We leave in an hour. As Lorenzo walked out with Alessandro discussing war strategy, Camilla stood alone in the library. She looked at the expensive books, the gilded cage she had just walked into. She had to escape. Tonight. But as she turned to leave, she saw a photo frame on the desk. It was an old black-and-white photo of a young Lorenzo, standing next to an older man, his father. But in the background of the photo, standing in the shadows, was another man. Camilla gasped. The man in the background was her father. Lorenzo wasn't just hiring her by chance. He knew. He had to know. Or was it possible that Lorenzo Moretti didn't know who her father was? But her father had been watching Lorenzo this whole time. Camilla realized then that she wasn't just a pawn. She was the queen on a chessboard she didn't understand yet. And if she wanted to survive the night, she had to play the game better than the man who invented it. She went to the door not to run, but to find a dress. If she was going to walk into the lion's den, she would do it wearing armor. The dress Lorenzo had selected for her was a weapon in its own right. It was black silk floor length, with a slit that ran dangerously high up the thigh, and a back that plunged down to the curve of her spine. It was elegant, expensive, and designed to distract. Camilla stood before the full-length mirror in the guest suite, her hands trembling as she fastened the diamond earrings Lorenzo had left on the vanity. She looked like a stranger. The waitress from Leone's was gone. In her place stood a woman who looked like she belonged on the arm of a king or a killer. A knock at the door made her jump. "Enter," she said, her voice sounding steadier than she felt. Lorenzo walked in. He was wearing a bespoke tuxedo, the black tie undone around his neck. He stopped in the doorway, his eyes sweeping over her with a clinical yet burning intensity. For a moment, the air between them crackled. He didn't look at her like an employee. He looked at her like a man starving for something he couldn't name. "Turn around," he commanded softly. She obeyed, the silk whispering against her skin. "Good," he murmured. He walked over to her, standing behind her reflection in the mirror. He reached out and adjusted the strap on her shoulder, his fingers lingering on her bare skin. His hand was hot, his touch possessive. "Tonight you are not Camilla the waitress. You are Sofia, my fiancée from Milan. You speak little English. You smile, you drink champagne, and you listen to every breath they take." "Fiancé?" Camilla turned to face him, eyes wide. "That wasn't in the job description." "The commission is old-fashioned," Lorenzo said, finally tying his bow tie with practiced ease. "They don't respect women in business. If I introduce you as an assistant, they will send you to the kitchen. If I introduce you as my future wife, they will ignore you. And when men ignore a woman, they get careless with their words." "Who will be there?" she asked, her throat dry. "The heads of the 5 families, and specifically Giovanni Vitali." Camilla's blood ran cold. Giovanni Vitali, the man who had taken her father's place, the man who had ordered the hit on her family. If he recognized her. "You're pale," Lorenzo noted, his eyes narrowing. "Are you going to faint?" "No," she lied, straightening her spine. "I just hate high heels." Lorenzo stepped closer, tilting her chin up with his thumb. "Listen to me. I am the most dangerous man in that room. As long as you are standing next to me, nothing touches you. Not Vitali, not the triads. No one. Do you understand?" "I understand," she whispered. "Good. Let's go start a war." The meeting took place in the basement of a deconsecrated cathedral in Lower Manhattan, now an exclusive members-only club called The Sanctuary. The irony wasn't lost on Camilla. There was nothing holy about this place. The room was dimly lit by chandeliers made of wrought iron. The air was thick with cigar smoke and the scent of brandy. At the center was a massive round table. Lorenzo entered with Camilla on his arm. The room quieted. All eyes turned to them. Camilla felt the weight of their stares, predatory, calculating. "Don Moretti," a rasping voice called out. Sitting at the head of the table was Giovanni Vitali. He was older now than the pictures Camilla remembered, his face lined with cruelty, his silver hair slicked back. He was flanked by 2 guards who looked more like executioners. "Giovanni." Lorenzo nodded, his face a mask of boredom. He pulled out a chair for Camilla. She sat keeping her eyes demurely lowered, clutching her clutch bag like a lifeline. "And who is this?" Giovanni asked, his eyes lingering on Camilla's bare shoulders. "I didn't know you had a weakness for beauty, Lorenzo. I thought you only loved money." "This is Sofia," Lorenzo said smoothly, taking the seat next to her. "My intended. She is new to the country." Giovanni grunted, seemingly satisfied. "Let's get to business. The Port Authority." For the next hour, the men spoke in a mix of English and Italian. They discussed territories, shipping lanes, and union bribes. Camilla played her part perfectly. She sipped her water, looked bored, and occasionally smiled at Lorenzo. But her ears were wide open. She listened to the shifting tones. She heard the underboss of the Genovese family tapping his foot nervously. Morse code, no. Just anxiety. Then the topic shifted to the stolen blueprints. "The triads are demanding a ransom for the prince," Giovanni said, leaning forward. "5 million. I say we pay it. We cannot risk the feds upgrading that vault before we get inside. I say we kill the messenger and take the prince back." Lorenzo countered, his voice like grinding stones. "We don't negotiate with thieves who steal from us." Giovanni laughed, a dry, hacking sound. He turned to his consigliere, a man named Luca, and muttered something in a rapid, obscure dialect from the slums of Naples. "O guaglione vo fa l'eroe. Facciamolo a ballan cop e chiodi prima che arrivi a casa." Camilla stiffened. She couldn't help it. Her hand clenched around the stem of her glass. Lorenzo noticed. He placed his hand over hers, squeezing gently. A silent question. Camilla leaned in close to Lorenzo, pretending to kiss his cheek. Her lips brushed against the rough stubble of his jaw. She smelled the sandalwood and gunpowder on him. "He just told his man," she whispered in Italian into his ear. "The boy wants to play hero. Let's make him dance on nails before he gets home." Lorenzo didn't react visibly, but his muscles tightened beneath his suit. "Is that all?" he murmured back, nuzzling her neck as if they were lovers sharing a joke. She whispered, her heart pounding. "He used the word gabbiano, seagull. It's code. My grandmother told me. It means they have a sniper on the roof." Lorenzo pulled back slowly. He looked into Camilla's eyes. There was a flicker of something new there. Respect and perhaps fear of how much she actually knew. He stood up abruptly. "Gentlemen," Lorenzo announced, buttoning his jacket, "the price is too high. Moretti family is out. We will handle our own security." "You're leaving?" Giovanni asked, his eyes narrowing. "The dessert hasn't arrived." "My fiancée has a headache," Lorenzo said, "and I don't like the air in here. It smells of stale fish." He grabbed Camilla's hand, pulling her up. "Walk fast," he muttered under his breath. "What about the sniper?" she hissed. "We aren't going out the front door." Lorenzo signaled to Dante, who was standing by the wall. Dante immediately moved to block the kitchen entrance. "This way," Lorenzo commanded, guiding Camilla toward the fire exit, behind a heavy velvet curtain. As they pushed through the heavy metal doors into the rainy alleyway, the sound of a suppressed gunshot pfft hit the door frame right where Lorenzo's head had been a second ago. "Run!" Lorenzo shouted. The alley was slick with rain and trash. Camilla ran in her heels, stumbling, but Lorenzo's grip on her arm was like an iron vice keeping her upright. "Dante is bringing the car around the back," Lorenzo yelled over the sound of the rain. Another shot rang out, sparking against the brick wall. This wasn't a warning. This was an execution. "They knew," Camilla screamed, gasping for breath. "Giovanni knew you wouldn't pay. Save your breath." They burst out of the alley onto a side street. The black Maybach screeched around the corner, Dante behind the wheel. The back door flew open. Lorenzo shoved Camilla inside effectively, throwing her onto the leather seats. He moved to dive in after her. Crack! The sound was wet and sickening. Lorenzo jerked violently, his body arching forward before he collapsed into the car. "Go! Go!" Lorenzo roared through gritted teeth, slamming the door shut with his good arm. Dante slammed on the gas. The car fishtailed on the wet pavement tires, screaming as they sped away, leaving the assassins behind in the mist. Inside the car, the smell of copper filled the air instantly. "Lorenzo!" Camilla scrambled up her hands, hovering over him. Lorenzo was slumped against the door, his face a shade of grey she had never seen on a living human. He was clutching his left side. Blood was pouring between his fingers, soaking the white shirt and the expensive tuxedo jacket. "I'm fine," he wheezed, his eyes fluttering shut. "Just a scratch." "You're losing a lot of blood," Camilla said, her voice trembling. She ripped the hem of her silk dress, tearing a long strip of black fabric. "Move your hand." "Don't," he groaned. "Move your hand, Lorenzo," she shouted, panic giving way to adrenaline. He moved his hand. The bullet had torn through his side, just above the hip. It was messy. She pressed the silk against the wound, leaning her entire body weight onto it to apply pressure. Lorenzo let out a guttural growl of pain, his head falling back against the headrest. "Dante Hospital!" Camilla yelled toward the front. "No!" Lorenzo grabbed her wrist, his grip surprisingly weak. "No hospitals. If we go to a hospital, the police come. If the police come, the commission finds out I'm weak. If they find out I'm weak, they burn my house down with everyone inside." "You're dying," she cried. "Take us to the safe house in the Bronx," Lorenzo ordered Dante, his voice barely a whisper. "The apartment on Arthur Avenue." "Boss," Dante warned, looking in the rearview mirror. "Do it." Lorenzo looked at Camilla. His eyes were glassy, fighting unconsciousness. "You said you don't clean up blood, Camilla. Looks like you have to break your rule." The safe house was a fourth-floor walk-up above a bakery. It smelled of yeast and old dust. It was sparse, just a couch, a table, and a medical kit that looked like it belonged in a war zone. Dante carried Lorenzo up the stairs, kicking the door open. He laid Lorenzo on the couch. "I have to go secure the perimeter," Dante said, pulling a shotgun from a duffel bag. "They will be hunting us. Miss, can you handle him?" Camilla looked at the man bleeding out on the beige sofa. She looked at the medical kit. She had no medical training other than stitching up her father's cuts when he came home from work, drunk and bruised years ago. "Go," she told Dante. "I've got him." Dante left. Camilla locked the door. She moved to the couch. Lorenzo was conscious, but barely. He was shivering. Shock was setting in. "I need to cut the shirt," she said, grabbing a pair of shears from the kit. "My favorite suit." He mumbled, a ghost of a smirk on his pale lips. "I'll buy you a new one at Target," she snapped, cutting through the sodden fabric. She cleaned the wound with alcohol. Lorenzo hissed, his back arching off the couch, his hand gripping her forearm so hard it would leave bruises. "The bullet went through," she said, examining the exit wound on his back. "That's good. No digging." "Stitch it," Lorenzo commanded. "Do it." Camilla threaded the needle. Her hands were shaking. She took a deep breath. "I am Matteo Rinaldi's daughter. I am not afraid of blood." She began to stitch. For 20 minutes, the only sounds in the room were the ticking of a clock and Lorenzo's ragged breathing. He didn't scream. He barely made a sound, channeling the pain into a silent, terrifying endurance. When she tied the final knot and taped the gauze over the wound, she was sweating as much as he was. She sat back on the floor, wiping her bloody hands on a towel. Lorenzo opened his eyes. They were clearer now. He turned his head to look at her. She was covered in his blood. Her hands, her chest, the ruined black dress. "You have good hands," he whispered. "Steady." "I imagined I was sewing a turkey," she said, her voice cracking. She reached for a bottle of water and held it to his lips. He drank greedily. "Why didn't you run?" Lorenzo asked suddenly. "In the alley, or when Dante left? You could have taken the gun and left. You could be halfway to Jersey by now." Camilla put the water down. She looked at him. Really looked at him. The armor was gone. The Don was gone. This was just a man who had taken a bullet because he refused to bow to an enemy. "Because you didn't leave me," she said softly. "You shielded me in the car. You took that bullet for me." "I was protecting an asset," he rasped, though the words lacked conviction. "Liar," she said. Lorenzo tried to sit up, groaning. "Stay down," she ordered, putting a hand on his chest. His skin was burning hot. He caught her hand, pressing it flat against his chest, right over his beating heart. "Who are you, Camilla?" he asked, his voice intense, searching. "You know dialects from 1980s Naples. You know commission codes. You stitch wounds like a mob wife. Don't tell me you're a waitress." Camilla felt tears prick her eyes. She was exhausted. The adrenaline was fading, leaving her hollow. "My name isn't Camilla Vance," she confessed, the secret tumbling out before she could stop it. Lorenzo's eyes widened slightly. "Tell me." "My name is Camilla Rinaldi. My father was Matteo Rinaldi." Silence stretched between them, heavy and suffocating. Matteo Rinaldi, the former consigliere of the Vitali family, the man who betrayed Giovanni Vitali and fled. The man Lorenzo's father had hunted for sport years ago. Lorenzo stared at her. His hand on her chest didn't move, but his thumb stopped stroking her skin. "Rinaldi," he repeated. "The traitor." "He wasn't a traitor," she defended, her voice rising. "He tried to stop Giovanni from trafficking children. That's why they marked him for death. That's why we ran." Lorenzo studied her face, looking for the lie. He found none. "So," Lorenzo said slowly, "I have the daughter of my enemy stitching my wounds." "My father is dead," Camilla said. "And the Vitalis want me dead too. We have the same enemy, Lorenzo." Lorenzo let out a long breath. He pulled her hand closer until her palm was resting against his neck. "If anyone else had told me this," he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous rumble, "I would have put a bullet in them myself." "Are you going to kill me?" she asked, holding his gaze. Lorenzo pulled her down until their faces were inches apart. She could feel the heat radiating off him. "No," he whispered. "You saved my life tonight. That debt is paid." His gaze dropped to her lips. The air in the room shifted from tension to something entirely different. It was magnetic. The brush with death had stripped away the pretenses. "But you are a dangerous woman, Camilla Rinaldi," he murmured. "And now that I know who you are, I can never let you go." "I don't want to go." She admitted the truth, surprising her. Lorenzo's hand moved to the back of her neck, pulling her down. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was desperate tasting of blood and survival. It was a seal on a pact. But the moment was shattered by the sound of a phone ringing. Not Lorenzo's phone. Not Camilla's. It was a burner phone taped under the coffee table. Lorenzo broke the kiss, his eyes snapping to the table. He reached out, wincing, and ripped the phone from the tape. He answered it on speaker. "Is it done?" a voice asked. Camilla froze. She recognized the voice. It wasn't Giovanni Vitali. It was Alessandro, Lorenzo's brother. Lorenzo stared at the phone, his face turning into a mask of pure fury. He didn't say a word. He just listened. "Hello, Volkov," Alessandro's voice continued. "Did you kill my brother or not? The payment is in the account." Lorenzo ended the call and crushed the flip phone in his hand until the plastic shattered. He looked at Camilla. The passion was gone, replaced by a cold, demonic rage. "It wasn't the Vitalis," Lorenzo said, his voice void of all humanity. "It was my own blood." He tried to stand up, despite the wound. "Lorenzo, you can't," Camilla pleaded, grabbing his arm. "Help me up," he snarled. "The war isn't with Giovanni. The war is in my own house, and tonight I am going to burn it to the ground." The rain had stopped, leaving the streets of New York slick and reflective like black oil. Inside the battered sedan, Dante had procured the silence was heavier than the humid air. Lorenzo sat in the back, his face a pale mask of concentration. The improvised bandages Camilla had applied were holding, but the blood loss had taken a toll. He wasn't relying on physical strength anymore. He was running on the cold, pure fuel of betrayal. "We are approaching the estate," Dante said, his voice low. "The guards at the gate are new. Russians. Alessandro must have swapped out the night shift." "Drive through," Lorenzo commanded, checking the magazine of the pistol he had taken from Dante. "They won't shoot. They think I'm dead, and they think you are bringing my body home." Camilla sat next to him, her hand gripping his knee. The blood on her dress had dried to a rust color, stiff and uncomfortable. "Lorenzo," she whispered. "Alessandro is your brother. Are you sure?" Lorenzo looked at her. The softness she had seen in the safe house was gone, replaced by the eyes of the butcher of Brooklyn. In the Bible, Cain killed Abel out of jealousy. Lorenzo said, his voice devoid of emotion. "Alessandro didn't just want my seat, Camilla. He sold my life to a foreign enemy. He put you in the line of fire. He is not my brother anymore. He is a disease." The car rolled up to the iron gates. The guard, a thick-necked man Camilla didn't recognize, peered into the back window. Dante flashed the high beams, blinding him momentarily. "Open the gate," Dante barked. "I have the package." The guard hesitated, then spoke into his radio. The gates groaned open. They drove up the winding driveway. The mansion was ablaze with light. Music was thumping from inside, loud, celebratory music. It was a wake turned into a party. "Here is the plan," Lorenzo said, as the car stopped in the shadows of the garage. "Dante, you take the perimeter. Silence the guards. Camilla." He turned to her, hesitating. "You go in first." "What?" Camilla asked, startled. "Alessandro needs to believe he won. If I walk in, he shoots. If you walk in crying, screaming that I'm dead, He will lower his guard. He will want to gloat. You want me to be the bait, she realized. I want you to be the distraction, Lorenzo corrected. He handed her a small, cold object. It was a spare magazine for his gun. Hide this. If things go wrong, drop to the floor. Camilla took a deep breath. She smoothed her ruined dress, messy hair, and tear-stained face. She looked exactly like a woman who had just watched her lover die. I can do this, she said more to herself than him. I know, Lorenzo said. He leaned in, kissing her forehead. It felt like a benediction before battle. Go. Camilla pushed open the heavy oak doors of the main hall. The music was deafening, some modern techno trash that clashed with the Baroque architecture. In the center of the room, Alessandro stood on a table, a bottle of champagne in one hand, a cigar in the other. Around him were a dozen men, some of Lorenzo's captains, who had turned, and several of Volkov's Russians. To the king, Alessandro shouted, spraying champagne over the floor. The king is dead. Long live the king. He's dead, Camilla screamed, her voice shrill and breaking. The music cut out. Every head turned toward the door. Camilla stumbled into the room, falling to her knees on the marble floor. She sobbed, a visceral, racking sound. They killed him. They shot him in the car. He's gone. Alessandro hopped down from the table, a cruel grin spreading across his face. He walked toward her, his shoes clicking on the stone. Ah, the waitress, Alessandro sneered. I wondered if you survived. Where is the body? Dante. Dante is bringing it. She wept, burying her face in her hands. Please don't kill me. I saw nothing. Alessandro crouched down in front of her. He smelled of expensive scotch and treachery. He reached out, grabbing her hair and yanking her head back. You saw everything, Bella, he whispered. But don't worry. I have a use for pretty things. Lorenzo was too stingy. He didn't know how to share. He stood up, turning to the room, arms spread wide. You see, Alessandro bellowed to his men. My brother was weak. He let a woman distract him. He died in a gutter because he lost his edge. I am the future I am. Click. The sound of a gun hammer cocking echoed through the silent hall. It came from the shadows of the grand staircase. You are nothing, a voice rumbled from the dark. But a disappointment. Alessandro froze. The color drained from his face so fast, he looked like a corpse standing upright. Lorenzo stepped into the light. He was covered in blood. His shirt shredded his face pale, but he held the gun with rock-steady precision. He looked like a revenant, a demon crawled back from hell to claim a debt. Enzo. Alessandro whispered the champagne bottle, slipping from his fingers and shattering on the floor. No. Volkov said. Volkov lied, Lorenzo said, taking a step forward. Or maybe you just heard what you wanted to hear. The traitorous captains reached for their weapons, but the sound of shotguns pumping from the balcony above stopped them. Dante and 3 loyal enforcers had emerged from the shadows of the upper-level weapons, trained on the crowd. Drop them, Dante ordered, or everyone dies. The guns clattered to the floor. The Russians looked at each other, calculating the odds, and slowly raised their hands. Lorenzo ignored them all. His eyes were locked on his brother. He walked slowly, painfully toward Alessandro. I gave you everything, Lorenzo said softly. I paid your debts. I covered your mistakes. I gave you a seat at the table. You gave me scraps. Alessandro screamed fear, turning into hysterical anger. You treated me like a child. Alessandro, be quiet. Alessandro, sit down. I am a Moretti too. I deserve the crown. The crown is heavy, brother, Lorenzo said, stopping 3 feet away. It breaks weak necks. Alessandro's eyes darted to Camilla, then to the gun in Lorenzo's hand. In a desperate move, Alessandro lunged for Camilla, pulling a knife from his belt to use her as a shield. But Camilla was faster. She didn't cower. As Alessandro reached for her, she slammed the heel of her palm upward into his nose, a move her father had taught her for self-defense. Alessandro stumbled back, blinded by pain. Lorenzo didn't hesitate. Bang! Bang! 2 shots to the chest. Alessandro fell backward, landing in the pool of spilled champagne. Silence reclaimed the room. Lorenzo stood over his brother, watching the light fade from Alessandro's eyes. There was no triumph in Lorenzo's face, only a profound, exhausting sorrow. He looked up at the Russians and the traitorous captains. "Get them out of my sight," Lorenzo ordered Dante. "The cellar. I will deal with them later." As the room cleared, Lorenzo swayed. The adrenaline was fading and the blood loss was catching up. He dropped to one knee. Camilla was there, instantly catching him before he hit the floor. "I've got you," she whispered, holding him tight. Lorenzo rested his forehead against hers, his breathing ragged. "It's done," he murmured. "The house is clean." "No," Camilla said, looking at the dark windows where the city lights flickered. "This was just the cleanup. Giovanni Vitali is still out there, and now that he thinks you're dead, he's coming for the rest." The drive to the Red Hook terminal was a funeral procession of silence. Rain lashed against the tinted windows of the armored SUV, blurring the city lights into streaks of neon blood. Lorenzo sat in the back, checking the magazine of his weapon for the 100th time, his knuckles white. He wasn't afraid of dying. He was terrified of what he was allowing Camilla to do. "You don't have to pull the trigger," Lorenzo said, his voice cutting through the hum of the engine. He looked at her profile, sharp, determined, and terrifyingly calm. "Dante can take the shot. You just lure him in. Once the trap is sprung, you drop to the ground." Camilla stared out at the dark waters of the East River as they crossed the bridge. She touched the cold glass, seeing her reflection. It wasn't the reflection of a girl who served pasta anymore. "No," she said softly. "He killed my father. He made me an orphan at 14. He made me live in fear for a decade. If I don't do this, I will always be the victim. Tonight, I become the judge." When they arrived, the grain terminal was a rotting skeleton of industry. Massive concrete silos loomed like tombstones against the night sky. The wind howled through broken windows, carrying the scent of salt water, rust, and decay. It was a place where things went to die. Lorenzo positioned himself in the shadows, behind a rusted conveyor belt, his injured leg throbbing with every step. He rested his rifle on a crate, his scope trained on the center of the loading bay. He watched Camilla walk to her mark. She looked small against the vast, decaying machinery, but she stood with a spine of steel. The wind whipped her hair, but she didn't shiver. "She looks like a statue," Dante whispered over the comms from the upper catwalk, where he lay prone with a sniper rifle. "A statue of vengeance." "She looks like a target," Lorenzo hissed back, his finger hovering over the trigger guard. "Hold fire until I give the signal. If anyone touches her before the trap is sprung, burn them all. I don't care about the plan. Just keep her alive." Then the headlights appeared. The roar of engines broke the silence. The Vitali convoy snaked into the facility, high beams cutting through the dust motes like searchlights. Camilla didn't flinch. She shielded her eyes against the glare, clutching the briefcase not as a shield, but as the key to a coffin. This was the crucible. The waitress had died in that safe house. The woman standing in the light was something entirely new. Before the couple could make their escape to the waiting Maybach, there was one final act of theater required in the grand ballroom. The reception was a sea of black tuxedos and designer gowns, a congregation of the city's most dangerous predators, drinking crystal flutes of Dom Perignon. Lorenzo stood by the ice sculpture, watching his wife. Camilla was not hiding in his shadow. She was holding court near the orchestra pit. Don Cavallo, the aging head of the Philadelphia crime syndicate, had cornered her. Cavallo was known for two things: his misogyny and his control over the tri-state union workers. He was smiling down at Camilla with a patronizing sneer, clearly assuming she was nothing more than a trophy. "It is a beautiful party, Signora," Cavallo said, swirling his scotch. "But tell your husband I need to speak with him regarding the dock worker strikes. The current terms are unacceptable." Camilla didn't blink. She took a sip of her champagne, her hazel eyes sharp as cut glass. "My husband is busy enjoying his wedding, Don Cavallo," she replied, her voice smooth but carrying well over the music. "And regarding the dock workers, the terms are not changing. In fact, effective tomorrow, the Moretti family is raising the protection fee by 12%. Cavallo's smile vanished. He leaned in, his voice dropping to a growl. "You are confused, little girl. This is men's business. Go find Lorenzo." The air around them grew heavy. Several capos turned to watch. This was the test. Camilla set her glass down on a passing waiter's tray. She took a step closer to Cavallo, invading his personal space. She didn't look up at him. She looked through him. "You are the one who is confused," she said, her tone icy and authoritative. "Lorenzo pulls the trigger. I aim the gun. I am the consigliere of this family now. If you want the unions to work on Monday, you will agree to the 12%. If not, I will make a call to the Department of Labor and hand them your pension fund ledgers. I believe the file name is Bluebird. Is that correct?" Cavallo turned pale. The Bluebird ledger was his deepest secret. "How?" he stammered. "How do you know that—" "I know everything," Camilla whispered. "That is my job. Now kiss my hand and accept the deal or lose your empire." Cavallo hesitated for a heartbeat. Then, sweating, he bowed his head. He took Camilla's hand and kissed the ring of the consigliere. "Agreed, consigliere," he muttered, retreating into the crowd. Lorenzo, who had watched the entire exchange from 10 feet away, felt a surge of pride so intense it nearly knocked him over. He walked over to her, sliding his hand onto the small of her back. "You terrified him." Lorenzo murmured, his lips brushing her ear. "I've been trying to get Cavallo to fold for 3 years." "You did it in 3 minutes." Camilla turned to her husband, a triumphant smirk playing on her lips. "He expected a waitress," she said. "He forgot that waitresses know exactly how the kitchen operates." Lorenzo laughed, taking her hand. "Come, the car is waiting. We have a city to rule, but tonight belongs to us." They walked out of the ballroom together, leaving a room full of powerful men, realizing that the balance of power had just shifted permanently. The king had his queen, and for the first time in the history of the New York underworld, the throne was shared. And that is the story of how a single sentence in a dying dialect brought down an empire and built a new one. Lorenzo thought he needed a soldier, but he found a queen. Camilla thought she needed to hide, but she was born to rule. In a world of silence, she was the only one who dared to speak his language. If you enjoyed this dark Mafia romance filled with twists, betrayal, and power, make sure to hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Did you expect that twist with Alessandro? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a story. Until next time, keep your secrets close and your friends closer.